Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Spiritual Emergency, When Personal Transformation Becomes a Crisis, edited by Stanislav Grof, M.D., and Christina Grof. Narrated by Brion. Introduction. To your tired eyes, I bring a vision of a different world, so new and clean and fresh, you will forget the pain and sorrow that you saw before. Yet this is a vision, yes, in which you must share with everyone you see, for otherwise you will behold it not. To give this gift is how to make it yours. A Course in Miracles. The central theme explored in this book in many different ways by various authors is the idea that some of the dramatic experiences and unusual states of mind that traditional psychiatry diagnoses and treats as mental diseases are actually crises of personal transformation, or spiritual emergencies. Episodes of this kind have been described in sacred literature of all ages as a result of meditative practices and as signposts of the mystical path. When these states of mind are properly understood and treated supportively rather than suppressed by standard psychiatric routines, they can be healing and have very beneficial effects on the people who experience them. This positive potential is expressed in the term spiritual emergency, which is a play on words suggesting both a crisis and an opportunity of rising to a new level of awareness, or spiritual emergence. This book is meant to be an educational reader for people undergoing such crises, for their relatives and friends, for the ministers whom they might consult, and for the therapists who treat them. We hope that it will help turn such crises into opportunities for personal growth. The concept of spiritual emergency integrates findings from many disciplines, including clinical and experimental psychiatry, modern consciousness research, experiential psychotherapies, anthropological field studies, parapsychology, thanatology, comparative religion, and mythology. Observations from all these fields suggest strongly that spiritual emergencies have a positive potential and should not be confused with diseases that have a biological cause and necessitate medical treatment. As we will see in this book, such an approach is fully congruent with ancient wisdom as well as modern science. The focus of this book is primarily, although not exclusively, on experiences that have an explicitly spiritual content or meaning. Throughout the ages, visionary states have played an extremely important role, from ecstatic trances of shamans or medicine men and women, to revelations of the founders of the great religions, prophets, saints, and spiritual teachers. Such experiences have been sources of religious enthusiasm, remarkable healing, and artistic inspiration. All ancient and pre-industrial cultures placed high value on non-ordinary states of consciousness as an important means of learning about the hidden aspects of the world and of connecting with the spiritual dimensions of existence. The advent of the Industrial and Scientific Revolution dramatically changed this situation. Rationality became the ultimate measure of all things, rapidly replacing spirituality and religious beliefs. In the course of the scientific revolution in the West, everything even remotely related to mysticism was disqualified as left over from the Dark Ages. Visionary states were no longer seen as important complements of ordinary states of consciousness that can provide valuable information about the self and reality, but as pathological distortions of mental activity. This judgment has been reflected in the fact that modern psychiatry tries to suppress these conditions instead of supporting them and allowing them to take their natural course. When medical strategies were applied to psychiatry, researchers were able to find biological explanations for some disorders with psychological manifestations. Many conditions were found to have organic bases, such as infections, tumors, vitamin deficiencies, and vascular or degenerative diseases of the brain. In addition, medically oriented psychiatry found means of controlling the symptoms of those conditions for which no biological causes were found. These results were sufficient to establish psychiatry as a subspecialty of medicine, although no organic basis has yet been found for the majority of problems psychiatrists treat. As a result of this historical development, people who have various emotional and psychosomatic disorders are automatically referred to as patients, and the difficulties they are having are referred to as diseases of unknown origin, even if clinical and laboratory findings in no way substantiate such labels. Furthermore, traditional psychiatry makes no distinction between psychosis and mysticism and tends to treat all non-ordinary states of consciousness by suppressive medication. This development has created a peculiar schism in Western culture. Officially, the Judeo-Christian religious tradition is presented as being the basis and backbone of Western civilization, Every motel room has a copy of the Bible in the drawer of the bedside table. And in their speeches, high-ranking politicians make references to God. However, if a member of a religious community had a powerful spiritual experience similar to those that many important figures in Christianity's history have had, the average minister would send that person to a psychiatrist. During the last few decades, this situation has been changing very rapidly. The 1960s brought a wave of interest in spirituality and consciousness exploration that manifested itself in many different ways, from a renaissance of the ancient and oriental spiritual practices to experiential psychotherapies and self-experimentation with psychedelic drugs. At that time, many people became deeply involved in meditation and other forms of spiritual practice, either under the guidance of a teacher or on their own. Since such techniques are specifically designed to facilitate spiritual opening, spirituality became for many people a matter of personal experience rather than something they heard or read about. Since the 1960s, the number of those who have experienced mystical and paranormal states has been steadily increasing. As indicated by anonymous polls conducted by the minister and writer Andrew Greeley and by George Gallup, a remarkable proportion of the population now admits having had such experiences. Although there are no reliable statistical data available, it seems that the number of difficulties associated with spiritual experiences is also increasing from year to year. Rather than concluding from the apparent increase of mystical and visionary experiences that we are in the middle of a global epidemic of mental disease, we should reevaluate the relationship between psychiatry, spirituality, and psychosis. We are now realizing to our surprise that in the process of relegating mystical experiences to pathology, we may have thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Step by step, spirituality is making a comeback into modern psychiatry and into science in general. The popularity of the Swiss psychiatrist C.G. Jung, whose pioneering work represents a milestone in the new appreciation of spirituality, is rapidly increasing among mental health professionals on college campuses and in lay circles. The same is true for transpersonal psychology, a new discipline that bridges science and the spiritual traditions. Convergence between revolutionary advances in modern science and the worldview of the mystical schools has been the subject of many popular and professional books that have found large audiences. The healthy mystical core that inspired and nourished all great spiritual systems is now being rediscovered and reformulated in modern scientific terms. More and more people seem to be realizing that true spirituality is based on personal experience and is an extremely important and vital dimension of life. We might be paying a great price for having rejected and discarded a force that nourishes, empowers, and gives meaning to human life. On the individual level, the result seems to be an impoverished, unhappy, and unfulfilling way of life, as well as an increased number of emotional and psychosomatic problems. On the collective scale, the loss of spirituality might be a significant factor in the current dangerous global crisis that threatens the survival of humanity and of all life on this planet. In view of this situation, we feel that it is important to offer support to people undergoing crises of spiritual opening and to create circumstances in which the positive potential of these states can be fully realized. However, it also seems necessary to issue a word of caution. Episodes of non-ordinary states of consciousness cover a very wide spectrum, from purely spiritual states without any pathological features to conditions that are clearly biological in nature and require medical treatment. It is extremely important to take a balanced approach and to be able to differentiate spiritual emergencies from genuine psychoses. While traditional approaches tend to pathologize mystical states, there is the opposite danger of spiritualizing psychotic states and glorifying pathology, or even worse, overlooking an organic problem. Transpersonal counseling is not appropriate for conditions of a clearly psychotic nature, characterized by lack of insight, paranoid delusions and hallucinations, and extravagant forms of behavior. People with chronic conditions and long histories of institutional treatment who require large doses of tranquilizers are clearly not candidates for the new approaches. We feel strongly, however, that in spite of possible misapplications of the category of spiritual emergency, the benefits for those who are truly undergoing a transformation crisis are so significant that it is important to continue our efforts. The matter of discriminating between pathological conditions and transpersonal crises will be examined more closely in our opening essay, Spiritual Emergency: Understanding Evolutionary Crisis. Our interest in this area is very personal and is intimately connected with our individual histories. Stanislav began his professional career as a
Sample complete. Ready to continue?